questions. Is Jawaharlal Nehru being demonized? Is the BJP trying to dismantle Nehru's legacy? Has the Congress deified Nehru? Just some of the issues we are raising. Joining me now, Swapan Dasgupta, former BJP MP, and Mridula Mukherjee, historian and former director of the Nehru Memorial. Swapan Dasgupta, do you believe that the Modi government is consciously, if not demonizing, certainly trying to diminish Nehru's legacy? Would you agree with the charge that the Congress is making today?
You know, every generation reassesses the past in the light of its own experience. And that's been a feature all over the world, and that's how history is always studied. There are facets of Jawaharlal Nehru which call for a certain review, which call for certain re-examination. And many of these, particularly his policies towards the economy, some aspects of his foreign policy, these are aspects which have been constantly brought under a certain new gaze. And in the process, there are certain sharp words which are exchanged. But I think what is important to know is not to get into the rhetoric of the whole thing, but to realize Jawaharlal Nehru was a very important figure in his time. Now, many years after, 50, 60 years after, 50 years after his death, I think there are times when you cannot hold those assumptions which Nehru held to be sacrosanct any longer. And I think that's precisely what is happening. So a lot of things are being questioned.
But is it just about that? When a union minister, law minister, Kiren Rijiju, for example, talks about Nehru's alleged 5 blunders on Jammu and Kashmir, goes public with that, do you believe that is, in a way, using your office, your constitutional office, you're a law minister, to target a former prime minister? Is that the way you believe Nehru should be assessed? He should be assessed by scholars. Why should he be assessed by politicians through their political lens?
I think there are ways of assessing him. The scholars assess him. It's also assessed in a political sort of way, where there's a sharp exchange of rhetoric. Now, there are aspects of Jawaharlal Nehru's Kashmir policy which certainly have been brought under re-examination by this present government, the abolition of Article 370 and 35A being one of them. The way you've really taken it out of the international arena is another way. The manner in which the internal issues are being dealt with another way. So you can see that aspects of Jawaharlal Nehru's Kashmir policy have been dismantled. You know, so I would say quite straightforward, it has been dismantled.
Okay.
Now, you may like it, you may dislike it, but that's the reality of the whole situation. Now, in the process, if someone goes into sharp rhetorical flourishes, that's part of, it's par for the course. That's not something which you should take seriously, and that's not something which would be the final word on the subject. Yes, scholars will assess Nehru. Yes, ordinary people will also assess Nehru. And I think there will be a happy mingling or unhappy mingling of both the trends.
Mridula Mukherjee, you want to respond, because there was a sense that on the flip side, if the BJP is accused of diminishing or demonizing Nehru, the Congress for the longest time is accused of deifying him, of reducing, of elevating him almost into a godlike figure, where the moment the BJP says anything about Nehru or anyone says something critical about Nehru, the Congress's hackles are raised.
I wish what you said was true. I'm sorry. I mean, most of the time Congress, I think, takes far too long to even respond to fairly devastating demonization of its national figures. I don't think that's true at all. I think that what Swapan Dasgupta is saying, nobody can object to sober reassessments of historical figures. But I think what we've been seeing is not just demonization, but, whatever words you want to use, vilification. I mean, Amit Malviya, the head of the IT cell, actually tweeted pictures of Nehru with different women, most of whom were his close relatives like Vijay Lakshmi Pandit and Nayanthara Sehgal and other public figures whom he was receiving like Jacqueline Kennedy, trying to suggest that he was a womanizer and vested. I mean, the level at which the vilification, demonization, whatever word you use is not strong enough, has been going on for the last 2 years, is shocking and nobody can defend it. I think we must start with that. There's a big difference between reassessing, and let me also say Nehru has been criticized from the time that he was Prime Minister, even before that. It's not that Nehru's never been criticized, he's been criticized sharply. His China policy was criticized in Parliament by the doyens of that period, where somebody, I forget who said that, just because there's no hair on your head, should we give it up? Because Nehru had said that there's no grass grows on that part which China has taken over. So in Parliament, outside Parliament, Nehru was criticized all along. I don't think that's the point. I think there is a big difference between hero worship, demonization, vilification, and whether it is political leaders like the Minister Riju or the Prime Minister himself, who in Parliament a few years ago, I remember, said publicly that Nehru was responsible for the partition of India. Now, such a complex thing as the partition of a country, to pick up one man, hold him responsible. Somebody says Gandhi is responsible, another says Nehru is responsible. We all forget about the British who were responsible. Somebody doesn't like them and says Jinnah is responsible. We reduced all historical debates to a level of inanity that is embarrassing for us historians, and I'm sure it embarrasses Swapan Dasgupta as well. He's a good historian.
Does it embarrass you, Swapan Dasgupta, the inanity which Mridula Mukherjee claims the debate has been reduced to, that complex issues of historical figures are not being reassessed, but are being used as instruments to further political agendas today? You demonize Nehru because Nehru stood up to the notion of a Hindu Rashtra.
No, it's not merely that. I mean, Nehru had a certain view of secularism, which is being contested at various levels, which is, I think, fine. It's part of the political exchange which is taking place in the country. When you get into mediums such as Twitter and all that, which is by inherently abrasive, and combative, I don't think you should assess a public discourse from what is said in a street corner meeting. That's not how public, how the discourse, an intellectual discourse should be assessed. That sort of conspiracy level of history has always existed and will continue to exist. I mean, it has its role, but I don't think that's something which we should take extremely seriously. I think far more important is to realize that, yes, Jawaharlal Nehru was an important figure of our time. Jawaharlal Nehru held certain assumptions, certain principles of state policy, which Congress swore by, and these have been gradually overturned by the BJP, which has a very, very different perspective.
Actually, in the process, Congress overturned these
there has been a critique of Jawaharlal Nehru, and there has been a critique of Jawaharlal Nehru, and that critique is justified.
Okay, Mridula Mukherjee, many will say, as Swapan Dasgupta just said, that there is a need for a honest critique of Nehru. Mistakes that Nehru made need to be assessed, which for a long time the belief was were not being looked at with a microscope. Now, with a new government, which perhaps is opposed to the whole notion of a Nehruvian ideology, it's open season.
Rajdeep, I'm glad that's not the way historians and professionals work. They don't wait for new governments to come to reassess historical figures. We do our job as good professionals. We don't wait for the BJP to come to power to critique Nehru or Indira Gandhi for that matter. Of course, all historical figures make mistakes, and some make them more than others. I don't think that's the point. To say that there's been no serious critique of Nehru till today, I think it's just false. It's just not true. And just to make the point, the 1991 reforms carried out by the Congress under Narasimha Rao, started by Rajiv Gandhi, in fact, starting more or less towards the end of Indira Gandhi's period, were a reversal of some of the fundamental Nehruvian policies on the economy, because that change needed to be made.
Are you saying, Mridula Mukherjee, that Nehru needs to be assessed in the times in which we lived, rather than looking at him through a rear view mirror, 70, 75 years later. Is that what you're arguing?
When Nehru did what he did, when he brought in the mixed economy, that was the need of the age. Indian capital did not have the resources to build those big steel plants and the kind of industry that we needed. So he brought in the public sector. By 1991, we and the world were at a different stage of economic development. The economic wisdom had changed, so we changed. The Congress party also changed, and today we are reassessing that, trying to find a greater balance, because also after the meltdown of 2008, everybody also realizes that somewhere liberalization had gone too far. So this is a constant process. Therefore, in history, we don't look for villains and heroes. That's not our job. We assess historical characters the way they should be in the context of their times, with the perspective that we acquire over time as well. I mean, it's a constant process. It's an ongoing dialectical process.
But you see, the thing, Swapan Dasgupta, is perhaps Nehru is looked at even more closely with a magnifying glass by the BJP, not just because he opposed at every level a Hindu Rashtra very strongly, but also because his heirs today control the Congress party. In a sense, Nehru's, the sins of Nehru's heirs are being sort of shifted to Pandit Nehru himself, that anything that his heirs did wrong is being then used to sort of suggest Nehru was responsible, even though, remember, Lal Bahadur Shastri succeeded Nehru and not Indira Gandhi. So Nehru did not, many would argue, consciously promote Indira Gandhi and the dynasty that followed.
Yeah, look, the point is very simply this, that in political discourse, as opposed to academic discourse, there are always the need to have villains and heroes and things, straw figures, etc. That's the nature of politics. You were seeing a very interesting debate, for instance, in the United Kingdom about Churchill, about the vilification of Churchill and the deification of Churchill. It's part of a larger thing about where Britain stands in the contemporary world. Similarly, you have a thing about Jawaharlal Nehru. Jawaharlal Nehru is being used as a symbol to fight battles which are basically contemporary in nature. And that's part of the political discourse. And separate that from a sense of history on how the historians or scholars may want to debate Jawaharlal Nehru, assess Jawaharlal Nehru. And I think you've got to separate the two all the time. And I think there's nothing wrong in both sets of battles being fought.
Mridula Mukherjee, a final word. In a sense, the political battle today is the Nehru-Gandhi family versus the Modi-led government. Therefore, Nehru gets automatically tangled in a way no other historical figure will. And you've got to accept it. It comes with the territory. And it's political.
Well, I think it goes much beyond that, frankly, and I'm sure Chopin agrees. The comparisons he's making about Churchill and all that, I mean, I think we all know the levels to which this Nehru vilification has gone on in India, and to say just ignore it is not. WhatsApp is a part of the political, weaponry today. Twitter is part of that, and these are very powerful tools today through which images are sent to people. I mean, I just gave one example of vilification. Actually, the kind of stuff that's there, no, Churchill has never been subjected to that kind of thing. Churchill's ancestry has not been questioned. It doesn't say he had a Muslim mother, his mother was a prostitute. I mean, I don't even want to go into it. And the level, that is not the level of politics which we should sanction anyway, anywhere. I'm sorry.
Maybe the times in which we live, maybe in the post-truth times in which we live, where alternative facts are sometimes posed as historical facts.
May I just say one thing, Rajdeep?
Yes, yes.
Just the final thing. There was a museum of prime ministers which has been set up. Jawaharlal Nehru has got a very, very fair treatment in India. I think there will be nobody who's taken objection to the fact that his contribution from 1947 to 1964 has been faithfully recorded, and it's up to people to appreciate, to critique it, etc.
Okay.
But I must tell you this, that at least in India, We don't tar the statues of Jawaharlal Nehru wherever they may be. We don't change the names of Jawaharlal Nehru's things. Churchill has had to have armed guards and put a box on his statue in Westminster Square. So that's that's a sort of level at which people fight in the West. We, I think, by and large, if we are having battles on Twitter and there's some ridiculous conspiracy theories, I think that's it's nothing to get particularly upset about.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Mridula Mukherjee, Swapan Dasgupta, appreciate your joining me here on the news today. Thank you.
Thank you.